Hey, good morning everybody. It's Clint with CCUA. We've got another Veg Out video for you. Today we are doing the first in a series of spotlights on various black agriculturalists, naturalists, ecologists, and in general, just black voices in the natural sciences. And so we wanted to start off today with somebody that most of us are familiar with because we learned about him in 4th grade, I believe, in our famous Missourians units, is George Washington Carver. So I've got a lovely photo of him that I found on the internet here. We're just going to talk a little bit about George Washington Carver, it's a little bit of his background and why we still talk about him today. And I've got my notes here, so if I keep looking down, that's what I'm looking at. There's a lot to keep track of with this guy. He had a very full life. But George Washington Carver was actually born a slave in southwestern Missouri sometime in the 1960s. Nobody's really sure about the exact date. And lived up until, I believe, 1943. So a pretty long stretch of time there. After slavery was abolished, when he was very young, he lived with several different foster families, going to different schools, high schools, just doing odd jobs, gardening, doing a lot of gardening, and even a little bit of homesteading after he graduated. In 1981, he was actually the first black student admitted to Iowa State Agricultural College, which I believe today is Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa. And he earned a bachelor's degree there in botany, and actually stayed on for a master's degree as well, doing botanical research into plant pathology and mycology. So studying diseases and funguses that affect the plants that farmers used. After that, he became the first black faculty member to teach at the Iowa State Agricultural College. In 1996, he was invited by Booker T. Washington to head the agriculture department at Tuskegee University in Alabama, where he would go on to teach for 47 years, which is a long time to do anything, but he taught at Tuskegee for 47 years. And while he was there, he was responsible for doing a lot of cool stuff. He really built the agricultural program into a very robust and well-respected research program. And thinking about some of the stuff that he worked on while he was there, we have to realize that George Washington Carver was an early environmentalist, really concerned with the land. I've got a bug in my face here. Really concerned with the land that people were farming on, and had concerns about soil depletion and running out of soil, which is something that we still talk about today, issues of running out of soil because of farming practices. And so through his research, he actually pioneered some really interesting methods. One of those is crop rotation. So the idea of not planting the same crop in a field every single year, but rotating them to help give the soil a break, to help build fertility and reduce soil loss. And another one is planting legumes to help build nitrogen back up in the soil. So within that crop rotation, making sure you plant some legumes in there as well. And a legume is a type of bean. So things that are legumes, especially that George Washington Carver would have been promoting, would have been things like peanuts, soybeans, cowpeas, and chickpeas. Were all ones that he would advocate as legumes to grow in a crop rotation plan. And the craziest thing I think about that is both of those are still really common farming practices that we use today. On our farm, we rotate our crops every year. We never have the same crop in the same bed 2 years in a row. And we plant leguminous cover crops to help rebuild our soil fertility, or to help build our soil fertility and increase the amount of nitrogen in our soil so that our plants grow better. And those are practices that we use because of the work that George Washington Carver did way back when. He was also concerned with not only the land and the environment, but also concerned with the farmers that were working it too. At the time, there were a lot of really poor farmers doing a lot of that farm work, and he wanted to help figure out ways that he could improve their lives. And so one of the ways he did this was by building a mobile classroom, a wagon at the time, that he would drive around and teach different farmers different methods. He would teach them about crop rotation, about legumes. You would also try and introduce other cash crops to them. Things like peanuts and sweet potatoes were two big ones that he liked to push. But also advocating for growing more produce, more garden produce. Because the biggest cash crop at the time was cotton. And it's as valuable as it is as a cash crop, it's not something you can eat. So with all of these farmers growing cotton, there just wasn't a ton of produce around. And so he advocated really strongly for also growing some garden produce. And that's kind of the most important points I wanted to hit. But I do want to end off by saying that George Washington Carver was probably one of the most important scientists of the early 20th century. I mean, just the work that he did to develop these agricultural practices that are still in use today, to reach out to the poor farmers of the time to try and help them build a healthier, more enjoyable life for themselves. And all of that having been born into slavery, and to become the head of an agricultural department at a leading agricultural research university of the time, I think is just about one of the most impressive stories that you could hear. I've got a lot of respect for George Washington Carver. I remember learning about him in our famous Missourians unit. Like I said, I think it was in 4th grade. But at the time, there was just a lot of stuff that I really didn't appreciate about what he did and how it still affects us today. So I hope you all found this informative. I encourage you to read more about George Washington Carver on your own. There's only so much that we can fit into a 10-minute video. But there is so much information out there, so many books. There's books at the Columbia Public Library. There's resources on the internet. Definitely encourage you to go out and learn some more about Mr. Carver. This is going to be a weekly feature that we do. One day a week, we're going to feature a different black voice in the natural sciences. So a few other ones that we are probably going to do in the next few weeks are Booker T. Washington. Got a very close professional relationship with George Washington Carver. And Henry Kirkland, who is a local agricultural educator. Was. Well, thanks for joining us today, everybody. I hope you all learned something and feel a little inspired to go do some research of your own. But we will see you all next week with some more VEG Out videos.